Are you ready to paint some of the prettiest models I've ever seen? Let's check out the Space Marines Bladeguard Veterans. Alright, here are my three little dudes. They've been primed. They're ready to take on some paint. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the base coat. In this case, it's going to be kind of a thinned down coating of Corvus Black. I like switching up the blacks, so I have a Deathwatch army, and you know they're all black, but that doesn't mean they all have to be the same kind of black. So I like to switch it up a bit. Try to keep them consistent within a unit, but across units I'll kind of switch it up. Sometimes they'll be really, really black, and sometimes they'll be kind of grayish, and sometimes they'll have some color on them. So these guys I'm going to go with Corvus Black. And so to do the base, I've kind of watered down quite a bit of Corvus Black, and so it's going to hit all the major armor elements. But I can't paint them just like this. I have assembled this model kind of temporarily just so I can prime and assemble it, but in reality I'm going to paint this kind of in stages. And so here I'm showing you all the different stages. Even the head comes off. So this part of the model is all one piece, it's all glued together. So I'm going to paint this, not necessarily first, but it's going to be, this is kind of one subassembly. The arm is another subassembly. The other arm is a third subassembly. The head, it's its own subassembly. And mostly because I want to make sure to get in here. So if I don't get in there, it looks kind of weird. There's some unpainted spots there. So I want to make sure to get all the, all that stuff before I put the head in on a more permanent basis. Sorry, just trying to get the sticky tack out of there, and it's kind of sticking to the model. And then I have the backpack and the shield as independent subassemblies. So this one model has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's 6 different parts I'm going to paint individually. Much the same happens with this guy and this guy. So I just wanted to point it out because I know it isn't always clear when we're painting stuff on YouTube how we paint it. And so a lot of people do this subassembly thing. Other people don't do a subassembly. They just kind of go in and paint, and they're really, really good. I am not that good. I don't have a steady hand, so I need to make subassemblies. If you're just getting started, you're probably going to have to do subassemblies too. Whether or not it's a habit you stick with, that's, depending on your skill level and the results that you see, or your personal preferences. For me, I can't imagine ever not doing this in stages like this. And so, I'm going to hit all the areas that are going to be black. I'm going to hit them with this Corvus Black. And already I can tell there's more paint on this than I want. It's not quite as thin as I'd like. So I'm going to go in and thin it out with a little bit of water. Yeah, the black paint on my palette was also too thick, so I want to make sure it's thinned out a bit. So I'm going to go over only those spots that are going to end up being black, or any spots that will be metallic. So I'm giving them the black overcoat or undercoat kind of in this step. Anything that I know is not going to be black, I try to avoid. So for instance, I will avoid painting that little pouch. Oh, that little pouch back there, that's going to be kind of a leather color. I haven't yet decided on the scabbard. I might do like a leather scabbard. I'm not sure. I'll probably, yeah, that's probably what I'll do. And so all these little, like there's like a belt that connects to the scabbard. I'm going to make those kind of leathery. So I'm going to avoid painting those in black because it's very hard to introduce a new color over the black, at least for me. So if I can avoid it at this stage, I don't have to try to fix that error later. One of the new things I'm trying is I am applying the model to the base relatively early in the process. I usually don't, but I've been noticing that I'm handling the model, and it, as I paint, and if you're handling the model, some of that paint's going to come off, and I want to avoid some of that. So I'm trying this out. I don't know how happy I will be with the end result, but I'm going to give it a shot. So this dude's based. I'm going to let it dry. Depending on what it looks like when it's drying, I'll decide whether or not it needs another coat. It probably will, but if I like the patchiness, maybe I'll let it stay that way. I'm going to do the same thing with the backpack, the power plant, whatever you want to call this thing. And in order to do a decent job, I'm going to put it on this little stick. I've got some sticky tack back there, and so most of this is going to be black or metallic, so I'm going to feel free to just slap the base coat pretty much everywhere, including this little iron halo deal, because that's probably going to be like a metallic color, probably gold. So it'll need an undercoat of a dark color like black so that the metallic gold can pop. I'm going to do the same thing here with the arms, but I'm going to be careful not to do the gun, because the gun, at least in my Deathwatch army, I like to do red, and so one of the design decisions I've made is if they're Primaris, the red of the weapons and other armor bits is a dragon red from the Army Painter line. If they're Primaris Marine, if they're Firstborn Marines, then I use the pure red for Firstborn. It's just a design. It's a kind of how I want my Marines to look, so that the Primaris and the Old World Marines kind of look slightly different. It's not a big deal, and I can, I think my first batch I didn't use that rule, but every subsequent batch I am using that rule. It's a rule for me. If you want to do something similar with your army, that's cool. It's a little bit extra work, but not that much. And so since this shoulder pad is the Deathwatch shoulder pad, so we'll eventually have a silver dry brush over the black, so it's okay to paint this shoulder pad, or to base it anyway. You'll notice that on this arm, I avoided not just the gun, but also the shoulder pad, because I don't really know what the shoulder pad's going to look like. I have to pick the colors for them, so I haven't figured that out yet. For now, I'm going to skip the head, because I haven't decided what color the head's going to be. And I'm also going to avoid the shield. I'm planning something a little different for the shield. Kind of the base of the shield, I want that to match whatever the shoulder pad, the chapter-specific shoulder pad's going to have. So I'm not going to base this in black because, if it's an ultramarine, if my model is going to be an ultramarine like this guy, he's going to have a blue shoulder pad, and so his shield is going to be based in blue, just to kind of call back to the chapters. So that's the plan. So I based everything up, and so you'll see all 3 models on this. It's not usually how I batch paint, but I'm trying something a little different. Since it's only 3, I think I can do kind of a small batch paint, and it should be okay. You know, painting in between picking away dog fur from my work area. So as you can see, I've done all the black parts of the model. I gave them 2 or 3 coats with the glaze I've been using, and you'll notice there's a couple of areas that are still white. Like I've said before, those are the places that are not going to be black. So here, for example, I'm going to do a little leather, that tabard thing I'm going to do in red to kind of match with my Deathwatch army. And I kind of painted over that part of the tabard. That's going to be a problem later, but that's a problem for later. The scabbard, the same thing. I'm going to do a little leather thing. So most of the armor has its base color. Same thing with the backpack. Here are the pieces that are not going to be black, are probably going to be metallic. But maybe I'll add a splash of color too, and so I'll deal with that later. This other arm, same thing here. There is a little spot of white there. That's the hilt of the sword. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that yet. But what I did do was I added just the base color for the chapter-specific shoulder pad. Now these guys, I could not find a chapter name for the life of me. I couldn't find any chapter that had the Spartan-looking helmet. So it's going to be my own chapter, I guess. It's going to be like a green with a white icon. I think that's how it's going to go. And so the reason I did this at this point, I usually wait closer to the end, but I wanted to get a sense for what it would look like here. So you'll notice the shield, I've made the same color as the shoulder pad. And I did this for every one of my dudes. So Ultramarines, they got the blue shield. Minotaurs, this one's kind of gross. It's it's bronze on the pauldron, and then it's a red icon. But I wasn't about to do a bronze shield, so I'm going to do a red shield like the icon in the middle, just to kind of give the different models some variety. So the next step is to lay down the other base colors. So this model isn't fully based, obviously. There's lots of parts that are still, have the prime showing. So I have to go in and add the color here, the color there, and so on and so forth. Probably start laying down this color. I think this is going to be like a golden color and kind of remind us of the Deathwatch. So I'll do a gold here. So I'll start laying down the other colors that this is going to need, and I'll do it kind of in a single model per effort. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll do it one model at a time, basically. And for my leather, I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to use, instead of just a straight up brown, I'm going to use bone color and then give it a brown wash, kind of like I do for banners and purity seals. So I'm going to make it look a little more leathery, I think, than my current approach, which is fine, but I think this approach might be more satisfying. But we'll find out in a second. Okay, so here's where I am with the models so far. All 3 models have about the same level of painting, so I've got all the base done. I've got some of the larger areas that are also kind of base, but they're non-armor base. And so you'll see like the tabard is, well, it's base. It's got its primary color. I have a couple of touches to make on it, of course. You can see the leather bits are kind of, they're kind of a weird color. They're not solid. I added, it was a kind of a bone color at first, and I added a watered down layer of leather brown, which is kind of a lighter, well, it's like a medium brown. Here it is. So I added this guy, and it was kind of a pretty thin wash. It was kind of between a glaze and a wash, so it was pretty thin, but not really thin. Once it dried, it was a little light and kind of uninteresting, so I went in with a really thin wash of this stuff, oak brown. It's a darker brown, so I did a really thin wash of that over the existing wash. So basically I washed it with two colors, one lighter and then one darker, and it gives it a really interesting effect. It looks like aged leather. The holster is a little weird looking, and so I need to do some touching up with that, but pretty much I've got all the armor, all the basic base layers. So now it's time to think about painting with an eye towards assembly. What I mean here is I want to paint all the pieces on this model that I can't paint once I attach the model. That way I have a complete model that's paintable without too much hassle. And so some of these I'll be able to do better than others. So for example, if I put the shield on it, if it's a front-facing shield, I probably will paint those separately until the very end. But right now, I could add the head, I could add the backpack, and I could probably add this arm. So if I paint this model with kind of that in mind, so maybe some of the details on the sword scabbard, maybe some details on the belt, that sort of thing. So it's not a full detailing, it's just detailing enough to get what I can glue ready to glue. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's the next step here. And I think I'll start with the straightforward stuff, which is the parts that are going to be obviously metal. I'm going with my favorite gunmetal. It reminds me of a Citadel color called bolt gunmetal. I don't know if it's still made, but that was my favorite back in the day. And this is pretty close. It certainly reminds me of that. Do a little dry brush on this shoulder pad for Deathwatch. I usually go in and add a little more detail after the paintbrush. I'll go in and kind of maybe give it a gold skull. I might do some other stuff, but I do like the way just a dry brushed metallic looks over black. There's nothing quite like it. Alright, here's where we are with our Bladeguard veteran. I was able to paint enough on the body, the main body of the model, that I was able to attach the head and the jetpack. So the jetpack has most of the basic elements on it. I can still do a little bit of detailing. I still have to paint the iron halo. I'll probably do some kind of gold on that. But the head is not quite done, but I've done a little bit of detailing on it, just enough so I can put it on the body. And it looks alright. I went with gray for the normal troops and the sergeant got this red. I haven't done any of the detailing yet, but I did do a little bit of wash kind of around the kind of like shadows or highlights or whatever you want to call them, just to give them a little bit of depth. So it's kind of a detail, but it's not really detail painting. I used kind of a light wash, carefully applied, and so that's that look right there. So the next step, I think, is to just do a bit more detail on the body, enough that I can attach the other parts of the model. So, you know, things like the Aquila on the chest there, that detail on the heraldry crest, just random little details. It's not a ton of stuff, but it's just things that'll kind of add to the look of the model. Yeah, so that's the next step. This little crest is going to be tough to do. I'm going to go with black since it's on a silver background. And I'm just going to lightly touch the raised part. I think this is called overbrushing. It's kind of like dry brushing, but it's not, since you're not actually drying the brush. You're leaving the brush loaded, and then you're just lightly touching the surface. So it's got elements of both. It works reasonably well for areas like this that are raised. I'm going to work on the gun detail just a little bit. This isn't overbrushing, this is just careful brushing. Some people like to do the gun all the same color, and that certainly would be, well, it'd be easier at my level of detail. The people who do that tend to do a really good job. So I was going to say it'd be easy to just do it all one color, but when the people who know what they're doing do it, it looks awesome. There's all kinds of highlighting and shadows, and it is one color, but it's way more complicated than that. For me, since I can't make one color just pop, I have to use several different colors just so that the gun has more detail than it otherwise would have. So I'll add little things like the grip, some parts of the mag maybe. And I'll usually fill in like one or two little buttons. If there's any recessed areas, I'll also try to get in there. So here, this little ejector port. We'll add a little bit of black. Hit some of those buttons there, just so it doesn't look so monochromatic. And the barrel, I usually always do like a gunmetal. So it's going to get a little bit of black undercoat, or undercoat is right. Now this part's going to be hard to see, but you see those three little lines on the gun. I want to add detail to that, but it's really hard to get the brush in there. So I'm gonna get them wet, and then on that wet stuff, on the water, I'm going to just touch a little bit of paint on there. So the paint flowed into areas that had water, and so it makes it a little easier to paint those really hard to get recesses. It's a little trick I picked up recently, and I'm a fan. It isn't like useful all over the place, but wherever it is useful, it is really useful. So there the guns, got some detail. Not pro level for sure, but it's my level. How's that? So here with these beads, I've seen some people do like individual different colors, and that looks amazing. It is way beyond my skill level. So all I did was I just, with a little bit of gold, I overbrushed right on the surface of it. And the paint stuck on the raised areas, the little balls, and didn't go into the recesses that joins the balls of this rosary looking thing. And so it looks like each individual bead of this thing is shining on its own, which is a cool little effect. More to the point, it adds detail without requiring a ton of skill and without taking a ton of time either. I'm going to try the same with this detail on this gauntlet. I don't know if it'll work. So, yeah, I did that. It looks okay. Like, again, it's not pro level. That's not where I'm going to be. But it is not too bad. You can kind of see the gauntlet detail there. It's not enough so you can like, oh yeah, there's a skull there. It's just a little glint so that whoever's seeing it can tell something is there without, requiring a ton of talent from me, which, it's going to be hard to come by. On the shoulder pad, I'm going to go ahead and add just a few little details, nothing too crazy. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with the sword. So, grabbing the other sword arm. Here's a sword. I usually go with the hilt, a gold color, but I was thinking of doing like just like a gunmetal color for the sword. But if I do that, gunmetal and gold kind of close together, I don't know that that's going to look pretty good. And if I do black, well, the armor's black. I don't know. I think I'm just going to have to risk it. I like the idea of gold hilts, especially since these are master-crafted power swords. And then to the pommel, I'm just going to add a gold pommel. And I'll come back once it dries and add a little red tip at the end there, kind of like a jewel. Space Marines, they don't have hot rods, so they need to customize something, and I'm guessing that's going to be their weapons. So here I'm going to do just a hint of gold on the skull. And on the bones. Now they're not really visible. Yeah, so I'm doing just a hint of gold on the skull and on the long bones. It's not really visible, but it's subtle. And I like the idea of that extra little detail. If I was a bit braver, and I've done this with other models, I'll go back with the with the eye, the Inquisition eye, and add red. But it's a little hard to see because it's stylized down here, so it kind of doesn't work as well as I'd like. But there is the arm. And the last thing I need to do at this level of detail is kind of go in and start working on the shield. I went in and added the undercoat to the shield. That's an important piece since I intended for the, so a lot of these details to be gold. Maybe too much gold. I don't know. I'll do the edge in gold, and I'll go from there. Yeah, I'm not convinced that's what I want to do, but I'm not convinced that's not what it's what I don't want to do. So let's just go with it. So here I'm trying to be really careful to just hit the edge. Now thankfully the model defines the edge for you pretty well, so you don't have to like freehand it. You just have to stay within the line, assuming you're going to do something like this, right? Where you're going to kind of not edge it, but like all around the perimeter of the shield, you're going to do a different color. You certainly don't have to do it this way. I've seen a ton of awesome looking shields. And I feel like I personally haven't done very many. I've done a few. But somehow I managed to complete one of my kill teams anyway. One of those kill team box sets without adding any shields. I have a few more kill team boxes that I'll kind of go back and make sure there's at least some shields in that mix. Apparently they're pretty handy in 9th edition. Should I go for it and just do the whole thing in the middle gold? I don't know, that's a good idea. Well, let's do it. Alright, so that's what that looks like. I've got two other shields. They're all going to be about the same thing, just with different base color. There's the blue one and the red one. I think the gold will contrast really nicely with both, all three of these colors. Well, the other two, and as well as this one. And I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of gold. And yes, you're right. But I think it's going to look okay once I go in and add some detail with washing. So I'm going to, dip it, add some wash kind of to the recesses on the shield so that the gold kind of pops out a little bit, but it's resting on a little bed of black. It should look okay once I do that. And I'll hit that once it starts drying. So I went ahead and finished most of the rest of the basing. Most of the detail I was adding was to elements like the shield. And so you'll see the back now has a little bit of work on it. I have some to go, but I was able to do all the shields. So there they are. Now they look pretty decent, kind of as they are, but they still need some work. So all I have on there right now is kind of just the base colors. And so the next couple of things I need to do is to add some details like the washes. I think the wash is going to be a big part of this. So I'm going to add a little bit of black wash to the gold elements, to the skull, and some different washes to the purity seals, and I'll add some details to the back of the shield. And I'll also add a bit of wash to the shoulders for here. What I really want to wash is that gold. So it kind of stands out. It's a nice, well, it doesn't really contrast nicely, but I think it goes together nicely. But it does need a little wash to help bring out some of the details on the skull. And the other thing I need to do with the actual model, or the main model, is add a bit of highlighting. Now, it doesn't need a ton because there's a lot going on, and a lot of the highlighting is kind of taken care of because I used a lot of glazes and washes. And so you'll see, for example, I haven't edge highlighted the holster, but because I used the glaze and the wash, it kind of edge highlighted it itself. But there's some pieces missing for the edge highlighting, like these parts of the armor. So I'll just need to kind of kick up the edge highlighting there, and any other place that it might need some edge highlighting. So some place on the armor, bits here, maybe the helmet a little bit. So I'm going to start working on that. You'll kind of see on this leg right here. So it's not a lot, it's just a touch. And so I'm going to do that to as many of these surfaces as I can get at. I won't be able to get to everything, but the point is just to add a little bit of emphasis on some areas that otherwise would just be all the way black and kind of washed out. Another little detail that I want to add, and I tried it already, but it didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. So there's a little box that's kind of sunken in. I want to add just a little bit of gray, but avoiding the buttons. So there's like I'm going to just drop a little bit of gray wash in there. I'm hoping it'll flow. So I let the paint just kind of flood in there, and the idea is to let it dry in that little gap, or in that little recess, that little pocket, and then I'll go back and touch up the buttons that are in there, just a little bit. You notice I did the same kind of with these joints where the leg is. I think it might need a little bit more. Just to kind of, any place where there's that mesh under armor, I'm adding a nice layer of this gray wash, just to kind of build up some contrast. There's not a ton of it on this model. And when it dries, it'll dry a lot less gray than that. But you kind of get the idea of what I'm going for. I'm going to do the same with these other models. While that dries, I'm going to move on to some other parts of this model. I'm going to start adding a little bit of black wash there. I don't want it very dark, just want a little bit to fall in the recesses. And I'll do the same with the shoulder pad. So I see what it looks like right now. It's white, but if I go over it with just a little bit of wash, and in this case I'm going to dab the raised surfaces because I don't want the black all over that logo or that icon, just in the recesses. Like I said before, this one didn't have an actual chapter. I couldn't find a chapter, Space Marine chapter, that has this Spartan helmet as the icon, so I just made one up. I went with green because I don't have a whole lot of green stuff. Probably the biggest place where I'm going to use this is going to be on the shield. So I'm just going to hit everything that's gold. We'll have a little bit of this wash. And I particularly wanted to pool in the recesses. So I'm going to go back in there and add just a liberal dose. The idea is that the wash is going to sink in. So here they are. They're almost done. It's really just a matter of detailing at this point. So here's the sergeant. He's on a base. I use the where is it? I use this stuff for the base. It does a pretty good job. And it's drying up. It's not all the way dry. And there's a couple of little patches that still need to go back and fill in. But this are just little details that'll kind of work through. And so I just have to work on some of the detailing. So you'll notice there's the gauntlet there that I'll probably need to add a little bit of decoration to. I have to work on the sword, the hilt, some of those other details there. Couple of doohickeys. So it's mostly done, but I still have to do some detailing. Same thing with this guy. He's my ultramarine here. I want to touch up that shoulder pad, work on the sword. There's some rocks on the base. So this guy has just like a couple of skulls on the base just to, add some detail. And finally this guy from the made-up chapter, kind of the same thing, just some detailing. You'll notice here on the shoulder pad, I got some of that texture paint on it, and so I'm going to have to touch it up. It's difficult to work with this texture paint. It really does want to get on everything, so it's something you want to keep track of when you're working with it yourself. So just some detailing work, maybe some cleanup on those little patches, or maybe I can leave them there. I'm not sure. It kind of lends a little bit of story. Makes it look like he was traipsing on that red mud and it kind of got on his armor. Here I've got just a little ammunition box. That's a little bit from one of the tanks. I think it's the Primaris Executioner, Repulsor Executioner. Kind of painted it up, shaved off some of the sides so it rests unevenly on its base. So yeah, it's time for some detail work. Should be cool. So I'm painting up the base, and so there was some rock formations on the base that I didn't put any of the texture paint on. So, you know, it needs to get painted, but it's really tight. And so I'm using a pretty thinned down version of this stuff, dark stone. It's one of my favorite colors to use for rocks. I went with kind of a bright blue sword, kind of just to show off that it's a power sword or some kind of force sword. You know, it's a magical sword of some sort. Going with just a standard steel sword seems not, you know, risky, but kind of lame. And so one of the things I like to do with these is just give them a little sheen of a metallic paint. And I think that's probably too much. So it's kind of a glowy effect, but it needs to be subtle. It can't be like, it has to be like a silver wash, just to kind of give it a little glimmer. Don't know if that shows up on camera, but it gives it a little glimmer, just so that people, you know, just so people, you know, the viewer can see it's not just a blue sword. It's a fancy blue sword. I gave this guy green eyes. I normally give my troops red eyes, but he's got a red helmet. Red eyes just were not going to work on this guy. So I think all that's left for this guy, oh yeah, the pommel needs to be golded up. And I need to do some dry brushing on the base because it looks a little plain. It's going to be hard to do the dry brushing. Oh, I do want to add a little paint detail on the back, on that little silver part of the power plant. Gonna need a little bit of red for this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's give it a red cap. That wasn't what I started off trying to do. I wanted to give put a little X on there, but my freehanding skills are horrible, worse than my normal painting skills. But next stop for this guy, oh wait, I do want to make this pommel gold. It's time to do a little dry brushing on the base. I'm going to go with a little bit of uniform gray, and then I want to highlight that once that's done with a kind of a reddish color, but I want something light for the reddish color to kind of sit on. And maybe uniform gray is not that color. So that's what it looks like after a little bit of uniform gray. Might need to go back in there with something lighter. But I'll try with all the others. So here he is with just a uniform gray, and here's what it looks like with a little bit of white. It's just a touch. It's got a little bit of both colors on there. Looks like there's maybe some ice crystals on that surface, which is kind of nice. Yeah. That's not the worst. All I have left to do is to mount the shields on these guys. When I put these on, I like to make them a little crooked so that they're not straight up and down on the model. It gives it a sense of movement. Don't know if it's all in my head or not, but I just like the way that looks. I'm going to try a little bit of orange dry brush over the white. I don't know if that's going to look good or not. I think it's going to do what I want, but you never really know. I mean, at my level of painting skill and experience, so the idea is that this orange dry brush will only really hit the white dry brush. And I'm not sure it's doing much, actually. Try a little more. Yeah, it's not really showing up. So I won't do it to the rest of them. But I wanted to see if I could make those kind of whitish highlights look a little more orange, and it just didn't work. And that's okay. Not everything has to work right. I'd like it to, but sometimes it's just not in the cards. Alright, I'm going to get it ready for its finish with the varnish. So I'm going to give these bases one more ring around. I got a little bit of gray on them with the dry brush. And it was basing, so just going to refresh the paint. Alright, they're all set. Here's what they look like. I still need to, the last thing I'm going to do is give them a blast with some varnish. I'll use the Army Painter satin varnish, and I should be able to shoot out. We'll take a look at them in a bit more detail right now. Here they are, our new Space Marine Bladeguard veterans. Overall, this was a pretty cool kit to paint up. There's a ton of detail on these models, and it can be a bit frustrating if your goal is to finish them quickly. But this is the kind of kit you want to take your time with. I know patience is not one of my personal strengths, and I think these models would have really benefited from a bit more time and care. Thankfully, this kit is so pretty that it'll look really nice if you manage to avoid giving it a good mangling. It helps that there's only 3 models to the box, so it goes by faster than a full unit of 6 models. Having said all that, I'll probably get another few of these just so I can see all the cool shields in different colors. That can really help break up the monolithic single color thing that happens to Space Marine armies. At any rate, thank you very much for watching and learning with me. I appreciate all of you that watch these videos, and especially those of you that keep coming back for the other videos. Have a wonderful day, and take good care of yourselves and each other.